Hello everyone. In this lesson, we will answer the question, where do we begin? So whenever I'm helping someone learn WordPress development, I always say that the first step, our first priority, should be setting up a dev environment for ourselves so that we can work locally. Now don't worry, I do not expect you to know what that means. In order to explain what that means, let's ask ourselves two new questions. What in the world is a dev environment? And what does working locally mean? Let's start with the dev environment. The best way to explain what it is to begin with its opposite. The opposite of a dev environment is your real website that the entire world can see. So in the past, you might have purchased a domain name, like your own .com or .org, and you might have also purchased a web hosting plan and used WordPress to create a website. In the industry, we refer to that real website that the entire world can see, we refer to that as your live environment or your production environment. On the other hand, a dev or development environment is a separate copy of your website that is usually configured so that only the owner or developers of the website can see it. So a dev environment is a private, safe sandbox or playground to experiment in, and no one from the general public can see your work-in-progress website. Okay, so that's a dev environment. Now let's answer our other question, which is, what does working locally mean? So local is the opposite of the cloud. Local refers to your personal physical computer. So for example, right now, I want you to picture two things. Number one, your personal computer, and number two, a server that lives 1,000 miles away from you. Now, the files that make up a website usually live on a server that a web host company maintains. The web host company leaves that server computer on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that people can access your website around the clock. And that means that WordPress and our websites usually live on a server, not on our personal computers. However, it is possible to install WordPress on our personal computers. And that will allow us to create WordPress websites even when we don't have an internet connection. Now granted, these won't be real websites because no one else can view them. It would be like saving a word processing file to the desktop of your computer. You're the only person in the world who can view that word processing file because it lives on your physical computer. Okay, but long story short, that process of working from your computer instead of connecting remotely to a server somewhere, that process is called working locally. Now, if we put these two things together, if we work locally within a dev environment, it creates the perfect conditions for coding custom websites. Because if we make a typo while coding, it won't be a big deal because no one will see the error messages except for us. Also, we won't need to constantly upload new files to a server because anytime we save a file on our computer, our local private websites are just immediately, instantly updated. And then, only when we're finished coding our website, only then do we push our files up to a real public web server for the whole world to see. Okay, so if we want to work locally, we need to install WordPress on our personal computers. But that's a bit trickier than it may sound. So here's a metaphor or an analogy for you. If we had a tree that we wanted to plant, we can't just throw that tree anywhere, right? We can't just throw the tree on cement and expect it to live and grow. A tree needs a particular environment. It needs an environment with soil, water, and sunlight. Well, it's the same thing with WordPress. We can't just plant WordPress anywhere on our computer. WordPress needs an environment with the following three things. Number one, PHP. Number two, Apache or Nginx. And number three, MySQL or MariaDB. Now don't worry, I do not expect you to know what any of those things are. But for now, just know that our personal computers need to have these things in order for WordPress to run.